welcome to GHEX 2020. It's a real privilege to be invited to speak to you for a few moments today about home education in the Republic of Ireland. My name is Catherine Sunshine. I am a British wife and mother, and I home educate my three gorgeous children here in Ireland. I have studied law at university in Dublin, and I have had first-hand experience of navigating the legalities of home educating within the state. Now let's go back to the very beginning. Article 42 of the Irish Constitution provides parents with a constitutional right to home educate their children, and up until relatively recently, exercising that right was straightforward. You simply didn't send your child to school and you commenced home educating. However, after very little consultation with the home education community, the Education Welfare Act was passed through at the Irish Parliament, and this act provided for the establishment of the NEWB. The NEWB, or the National Educational Welfare Board, was under the authority of the Department of Education, and one of its functions was to create and maintain a register of all children receiving education at home. The Act also provided for the framework of the application and assessment process of home educators. This meant for the first time, parents wishing to lawfully exercise their constitutional right to home educate were first required to make an application to the government seeking permission to do so, and required to undergo an assessment process so as to determine if their child was or was likely to receive a minimum standard of education. In 2013, the Irish National Child Protection Organisation, Thieulloy, was created. Section 72 of the Child and Family Agency Act 2013 dissolved the NEWB and conferred its powers and functions to Thieulloy. This now meant that the National Child Protection Organisation of Ireland, who primarily dealt with cases of child abuse and neglect, was to oversee home education rather than the Department of Education. At the time and now, many in the home education community feel that such a transition was inappropriate, if not offensive. As to do so somehow suggested that home education was something to be suspicious of, or a possible safeguarding concern, which of course is not the case. Fast forward to 2016, and the time came for me to make an application to register my eldest child as receiving education at home. I submitted my application in accordance with Section 14.4 of the Education Welfare Act to Thieulloy, who acknowledged receipt of my application. They responded by stating that I was required to complete their R1 form. I asked them to provide me with a legal basis as to why I must complete this form, as I could not find one myself. They never provided me with a legal basis. My main issue in completing this form was that in doing so I would be giving consent to the Child Protection Agency of Ireland to have unlimited access to my home and my children indefinitely. I declined to complete this form, and as a result, Thieulloy refused to process my home education application, thereby inhibiting me from exercising my constitutional right to my child. Subsequently, Thieulloy issued us with a school attendance notice as per Section 25.1. This was a legal notice requiring me to send my child to a school of the state's choosing. However, as per Section 17.2b of the aforementioned Act, such a notice cannot be made in cases where an application for registration to home educate has been submitted. Therefore, we were of the opinion that such a notice was void, and non-compliance with this notice would not constitute an offence. Nevertheless, Thieulloy sought to prosecute us, and if found guilty, a parent could face a fine of up to £500 and 1 month imprisonment. We were taken to court and prosecuted under Section 25.4 of the Education Welfare Act, alleging that we had failed to cause our child to attend school. We were initially found guilty by the lower court, however we appealed this, and on the 26th of September 2019, the higher court upheld our appeal. The court decided that the R1 form was not a legal requirement. It was not a prerequisite for the application process, and parents were not required to complete it. The court held that our application for registration had been valid all along, and that Thieulloy could not refuse to process it. Some 11 months passed, and parents were now free to make applications without the use of the R1 form. It is important to note that Thieulloy had no right to appeal the court's decision to a higher court, but they were unwilling to accept the court's decision nevertheless. Here we are in August 2020, and along came SI 330. An SI is a statutory instrument. It's a type of law that isn't passed into being through a process of democratic voting, but rather it is signed into law with the stroke of a minister's pen. This new law enshrined the R1 form into law. As of August 26, 2020, Thieulloy will refuse to process any applications that do not contain the full completion of their R1 form. We feel that the government creating this statutory instrument was somehow an attempt to override or circumvent the court's decision. This now means that parents wishing to exercise their constitutional right to home educate in the Republic of Ireland must sign a form which gives the Child Protection Agency unlimited access to your family home and your children indefinitely. We are very concerned that the government is slowly but surely encroaching on people's constitutional right to home educate, and we understand that some of our European friends may feel the same in their own jurisdiction. However, we have not lost hope. We have been consulting with our legal team and other members of the home education community and are confident that there is a case to challenge this statutory instrument. Thank you for listening, and I invite any questions you may have. God bless and enjoy your day.
So thank you. I'm sorry. Give me just one more minute to stop. Here I am again. It was wonderful to have some news from Ireland, even though I feel that we will have so many things to share during and to discuss during the questions. Catherine will not be here for questions, but for those that are attending this question, you may put questions in the Q&A box, and maybe later Catherine could answer for some of them, because we are recording the session and the session will be available later for more people to see. So I will now present to you all Jonas Himmelstrand. I'm sorry, Jonas, because it's not easy sometimes to know if we are saying our different words in different languages, but I did my best. Jonas is a Swedish nationally exiled to Finland in 2012 for reasons of homeschooling. Woman potential educator for nearly 40 years. Author of Swedish book that could be translated for Following Your Heart in the Social Utopia of Sweden, based on the book presented to four national governments and at the United Nations on the challenges of Swedish family policies. Jonas is an international director representing Sweden for the Nuffield Institute. I'm sorry again for my pronounce, in Canada. Studied homeschooling since 1998, active leader in the homeschooling movement since 2008, chairman of the first Global Home Education Conference in Berlin in 2012, married to Tamara and father of 3 homeschooled children. Nice to meet you, Jonas. So the word is yours. We are wishing to hear what is your experience in these both countries, or So nice to meet you. Jonas, wait just a minute because you are muted. I will give you the sound just now. Where are you? Okay, so you can unmute you right now in your microphone. Okay.
Thank you, Sílvia. Your pronunciation is fine. Jonas Himmelstrand is what you say in Swedish, but I'm very used to Jonas Himmelstrand. Well, thank you for having me here, and I'm sorry to hear about the developments in Ireland. This is a bit more positive for Finland. You could have the theme of my presentation here saying how Swedish homeschoolers managed to continue homeschooling even when the Swedish government made it illegal for all practical purposes. Prior to 2011, homeschooling in Sweden was possible in some municipalities as a legal exception to the school obligation of the Swedish law. Swedish law has a school obligation. You have to go to school unless you can follow the exception. Still, there were never many homeschoolers in Sweden. At the time homeschooling was at its height, there was 100 children in a country of 10 million people, so that's very small. In 2008, the Swedish government suggested a new law only allowing homeschooling under exceptional circumstances. Now, we learned from a lawyer quickly that this was legal fine print for never. It was in effect forbidden. Within weeks in 2008, we founded a Swedish homeschool organization, Rohus. We worked intensely with media. We made demonstrations, we met members of parliament, we answered a government request for the consideration of the new law, but everything we said was ignored and the new law came into effect July 1st, 2011, essentially making homeschooling illegal. I think the reason is we were simply too few. There was only about 50 families in Sweden, although we managed to collect almost all of those for a demonstration in Stockholm. What then happened is that Swedish homeschoolers left Sweden in exile to all kinds of different countries. And the same year the new law came into effect, 5 of us homeschooling families left for the Åland Islands. If you look on the map, you will see a small group of islands between Sweden and Finland in the Baltic Sea. The Åland Islands is a Swedish-speaking autonomous region of Finland, 45 kilometers or 30 miles from the Swedish coast. Finland has, as most democracy, a learning obligation by law, even in its constitution, instead of a school obligation. So this means in Finland you have to learn, but you don't need to learn in school. And as this is in the constitution, it's very well protected. And this means that homeschooling is protected well as a form of basic education. Now, the Åland Islands is a small group of islands. It's comparable in size to Oahu in Hawaii or Grand Canaria in Europe, but much fewer inhabitants, only 30,000 inhabitants in total. By being monolingual Swedish, it makes very attractive to Swedes. Finnish is, as you may know, quite a difficult language, which is very different than all other European languages. But Åland Islands has, by a special treaty since the First World War, is monolingual Swedish. So when we came there 2011 and early 2012, as 5 families, there was only one homeschool child on the Åland Islands. Although it was legal, it wasn't common. Suddenly, 5 Swedish families came with a total of 8 children of school age. The local government got a bit worried at first, and an official called the schools and asks if these children, our children, were in good care. The schools had met us and they confirmed these are good families. We talked to the official later and he told us that made him let go of any apprehension. This is a small place, one trusts one another, the lines of contact are easy and short, so this is possible there. Now today, 9 or 8 years later, there are more than 70 Swedish children being homeschooled on Åland. There's been an exile, enormous exile. We could never have imagined this when we moved here 8-9 years ago. This might not sound many, but on an island with 30,000 inhabitants and its own legislature, that makes it more homeschoolers per capita than any other country in the world, except for the United States. And the number is growing. Many Swedish families move here already when the children are preschoolers, just to be ready for when school age comes. The local inhabitants of the island, they call us with a smile and warmth, Swedish school refugees. So the Åland Island legislature accepts and even welcomes Swedish school refugees. One local politician I talked to, how can you get more coming here, is what he said. The Åland Islands, because of its relationship with Finland, very much wants Swedish-speaking people to come to ensure the Swedish language. A few years ago, the school law of the Åland Islands was revised, and I was asked to be part of the government committee to suggest a revision of the law. We met for 20 hours in total. The law on homeschooling was clarified. All the needs of the homeschoolers, key needs, were accepted, and we accepted that the authorities needed oversight. And we came to an agreement that has worked wonderfully well. Homeschooling is now an established form of learning on the Åland Islands, and it's likely one of the best regions in Europe to homeschool today. Also, the Åland Islands has among the best schools in the world. Finland is good, and Åland Island is good in Finland. And in the main city of Mariehamn, it's according to locals on par with Singapore in PISA. So it's not that the Åland Island schools are bad in any way, but the school director in the main city of Mariehamn told me, we want to be best on everything, and we want to have the possibility to home educate for those who do so. If you look at Sweden again today, even during the pandemic, the school obligation is as rigid as ever, unfortunately. Even children with parents having pre-existing conditions, which put them in the risk zone of the coronavirus, are not allowed to be homeschooled. The school will say, we understand you're concerned about your parents, but you have to come to school. Homeschooling illegally, that means alerting the Child Protective Services and heavy fines. Our family actually was fined $12,000 or 11,800 euros at the time. A collection in Sweden helped us there. The Åland Island has become a wonderful home for Swedish homeschoolers. Everyone lives within a 30-kilometer, 20-mile radius of the only city, Mariehamn. Many of us, parents and children, meet every Tuesday afternoon to play soccer together. We have a common email list to post events for anybody wanting to organize anything. Homeschool children have already made themselves visible on the island. They have won essay contests, they have won musical events, they have been actors in local plays, so they have become very visible, and in such a way, society has come to understand that homeschool children do very well. Many of the teachers doing the oversight are quite impressed with the results of homeschooling. Some even say that school have things to learn from homeschoolers. As our children grow up into adulthood, we are proud that we will have made a mark in Swedish political history forever. The families who had to flee Sweden in the early 21st century in order to home educate their children, which is a home human instinct and a basic human rights, which was denied by the Swedish government. The Swedish government today is not entirely happy about this development, but there is nothing they can do about it. And so we had a very tough situation 10 years ago, and it's become something quite beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonas. I'm amazed about this characteristic that I think we homeschoolers or homeschool families have, that we are able to be very resilient and to transform our difficulties in some opportunities to do something else. And we are here in Europe with so many different we are facing so many different difficulties, and in some countries more freedom, in other countries less freedom, but this make us strong and make our children strong. So I congratulate you by your story, and I hope some people make some questions for you also, for us to know more about your experience. That I think it's a great example for us all. Okay, thank you, Jonas. So now I will present you our third speaker. Emmy is a colleague of me in the Global Home Education Exchange. Emmy is also a board member, a member of this global community that I like to feel as colleagues with the same cause. So there are lots of things that I could say about Emmy, and I invite you all to know more about the biographies of all the speakers in this session in the dashboard, in the site about this conference. But let me tell you that Emmy have a great story about working for so many different areas in human rights, regarding to family, I was amazed about, for example, victims of domestic violence, for example, and so many things like that. I cannot say everything that I should have to say about Emmy. Emmy, sorry for that, but if you want to complete anything else, then I give you the word, you be free to do it. But right now, Emmy is working, is the mother of three young people, 3 children, and is working as a lawyer, defending with some partnership with more organizations, defending the right to education, defending the homeschooling, and the right to education as free people. Isn't that it, Emmy? So I hope I'm being fair with your with so many things that I could say about you. The word is yours, Emmy. We are thrilled to hear about Hungary and about your work as a lawyer. We all need these kind of roles in our lives also. So thank you, Emmy. You can begin.
Okay, thank you, Sílvia, for introducing me. Welcome, everyone. Actually, I should be sitting somewhere in Manila by now, but I'm sitting in Hungary in a nice office. And I'm glad to see, I think, more parents on this way than it would be the offline way. So I welcome everyone. As Sílvia mentioned, I am a lawyer. I have been a homeschooling mom for many years, homeschooling internationally, mostly in the US, a long time traveling in an RV with my family, and then 2 years in Hungary. Today, I will tell you about some recent changes in the Hungarian educational law that influences homeschooling in our country, be it a local or an international family that is concerned. Now, I will share my screen. I hope it will be easy. Okay, so can you see the presentation now?
Yes, Emmy, it's okay. You can continue.
Okay, so my first slide tells about changes in the legal frames in general. The old law in effect until 2019 said that the principal of the local school was in charge for deciding about homeschooling. It was called a private student status. And the local principal who knows the child, who knows the parents, the school environment, the family, and who is able to monitor the process closely was in charge for this. The new law has set a governmental office in charge for the same decision. It's a new office that doesn't know the child, does not even see the people involved, and the whole decision process is a plain paperwork now. The parents, teachers, and professionals are excluded from this process. Their opinion or suggestions are not to take into account for the decision. And after the decision, there is no need to explain the reason of objection. I will tell you later about the practical results of this change. But now the second change in general, the old law said it's okay to homeschool or have this private student status if it is not disadvantageous, and the local authorities could prove it and could have an eye on the family that everything is okay. The new law says you can apply, so there is no warranty to get the permission, but you can apply if you can prove that this is advantageous for your child. But the problem is that there is no clear definition what it means, advantages. It just says that, I mean, the office's advice is that write down everything you think it will count. And the burden of proving is on the parents. So the law says if special circumstances justify, but you don't know what are special circumstances that are enough reason to get the permit to homeschool, and if it's beneficial, but who knows what counts beneficial for them. So the next one, I would like to compare the educational law to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the Hungarian Constitution. So the declaration says that parents have a prior right to choose the kind of education that shall be given to their children. And the Constitution, according to this, states that the parents have the right to decide about the education of their children. I gave this quotation in Hungarian too. But the educational law in Hungary says that every child has to participate in the institutional education and attend school. So we can see the contradiction between these laws, and this is a problem. So what does it make in the practice? Who can homeschool now? Actually, we see after 1 year of experience of this new law, what is the practice? So the practice says that professional athletes, if proven conflict in their schedule, in the school working schedule and the training schedule, if there is a proven conflict, then they can get this permission. Or if they have special health issue or really serious learning disabilities. In this second case, I have heard from parents and teachers that it doesn't guarantee an exception from the attendance, because a lot of children doesn't get permission even if they have serious learning disabilities. And the third reason that is accepted is if someone lives abroad, but I think it's obvious. Okay, what are the numbers? Before this law, there was an increasing number of homeschoolers in Hungary, and generally high educated parents. We made a survey by Vitkara and Marton Fiers in Hungary, and we tried to reach all the homeschooling families in Hungary, and it showed a picture about parents. They have higher education level or more diplomas and more languages as a spoken foreign language as the general population in Hungary. So now, the year before, I have asked this office, who is responsible for these decisions, to give the numbers of the homeschooled children. So the previous year, it was called private students, and the number was 9,545. This year, students with individual or partially individual working schedule, this is the new name of the possibility of homeschooling, the category, this is almost the half of the number of children who can be homeschooled or partially homeschooled by this new law. The total number of students are compulsory school age are 700 20,000 and something. So what is about missionaries and foreign citizens in Hungary? Unfortunately, I have the news that if they have a permit to stay more than 3 months legally in Hungary, then they fall under the same regulation as Hungarian citizens. So they have to do the same things. If there are someone who plans to be a missionary or is a missionary or foreign citizen living in Hungary, they can turn to shareeducation.org. It's a great missionary organization who can help with testing, with other questions about missionaries education in Hungary and Europe in general. Okay, so some words about the alternative schools. The co-ops, the learning groups are now either shutting down or merged into the NAT, the national curriculum, that makes that they are under closer control. There are regular checkups about how they grade the children, how they arrange the classes and everything. Parents and teachers have a minimum of flexibility. However, it is still better because of the not that big classes, and so they are just smaller groups, and so more flexibility, but it's not as it was before. And they have to test the children every semester, each semester based on the NAT, the national curriculum, and there is no exception. And there is no exception even in the case if someone gets the permission to be homeschooled. Okay, so what are the ways to go for us? There is clearly a lack of freedom to homeschool now in Hungary, but I really suggest do not grow bitter or do not get passive in it. But we should pray thankfully because God has a plan, and we should act according to our hope. Let us not give up on our ideas and freedoms, but be active in a respectful and dedicated way, and believe that God can open up gates that we never have thought of. As a first step, you may visit our European workshop the day after tomorrow at 6 p.m. Central European Time. And then there we can share ideas and talk more about the current situation in all of European countries. And now please stay with us for our next presenter. So thank you for your attention, and I give back the mic to Sílvia.
Okay, thank you, Emi. It's so nice to hear so many things in common that we will realize that we have here today. I felt that your description about the Hungary situation is so similar with the Portuguese one, but I will have one or two questions that I will leave for the end. So, but thank you again, and thank you to remind all of us and those who are attending this session that we will have next Thursday a different workshop where everyone could share new ideas to help the European countries to be more together and to construct a better world with more freedom and with more respect. So welcome to that session if you can. Okay, let me continue to present our next speaker. It's with pleasure that I will present to you José Ramalho. José Ramalho is a lawyer that works with the Movement for Freedom in Education. He supports families in home education in many different situations here in Portugal. He does it about 8 years from now. He's very experienced in court about in families process. He's also experienced about family rights and supporting families dealing with governmental institutions. She is the one that is helping us in Portugal and with different associations in different schools and mainly with families that are having problems with freedom in education, their own kids in home education. She is the one that is helping us by now. So, José Ramalho, I welcome you here, and please, you may present your what you have to present to ourselves. So the word is yours.
Okay. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to stay here with you and know how the things is going around this Europe. When I was invited to prepare this little presentation and regarding the homeschooling, and I'm sorry because I'm also always in the field, and I deal with this in the very, very practical way, because the families, when they come with the problems with the state, and we must get a solution for them. But when I was thinking about it, what I'll say, I was remembering and after I hear you, this idea comes to me. I remember what the Julius Caesar, the Roman Empire, told about us, about these little people in Portugal, because they come to us and they say, these guys are not so governable and we cannot do about them. They are very, very hard to make something. But because, why I'm saying this? Because all families, because the families are being attacked, under attack, the values, our values from Europe, family, and our bases are under attack. That's why I'm hearing, and it's a kind of question that we could discuss in another day, because I think this is not for a reason. But we have defense. We have a lot of things that we can do. And for example, our constitution here in Portugal, it's always protect the families. And from 1976, they already established, and earlier, that the parents are the ones that are responsible. They have the duty and they have the right of the education of their children. This is a simple sentence that is in the Constitution, but gets to us a lot of power to get these rights for the families. Even today, this Constitution is the same; it is not changed, and is one of the bases that the families get to defend themselves, because the parents have the right for their children, and no one can take that. And the government now, in the last year, published a law that tries to limitate the parents and limitate homeschooling, creating some rules for that. For example, the families must be connected to a school, public school. The parents must have a degree, and so many things. But as I said in the beginning, we must be resilient, and we have also a lot of issues that we can manage and defend the families. But legally, the government is trying to make a board, to make a kind of establishment for the families who wants to do homeschooling. Of course, it's not closed, but because our association is working with politicians and working in many ways to try to change this. But even this way, families that I found that come to me find a way, or we find some ways to conturn this. It's not a question that we can say to all families, because each case have its own particularities. But it's rich. It's a field that is very rich in change that we can make. As I said, I work in the field, so my problem is to get for this family in concrete a solution. But also we work with the state and the politicians to try to make these things going. And because now here in Portugal we have another ally, if I can call it this way, that is the courts. Our judges are totally independent from the state, and the commission that protects the child cannot do nothing for themselves. They depend also always from the judge, and I find many judges that are very concerned about this, and that they are very regarding these families, because when they know what we're talking about, when they know, because many of them don't know what is homeschooling, they don't know what it is that families are doing. But when they're starting to realize what it is, they don't go after the families. They try to understand the families. And it's very good for these families to understand that the state, that for one way, is trying to condition it, to making, to obligate to come to public school. In the other way, the same state for the courts try to understand and try to make the best for these families. I was to say to the families that they just don't care about the parents, they just don't care about the state, they care about the children. And if the children are okay, they realize that. And it's a point that we work in our here in Portugal. But the legislation, the most that we have now, it's our constitution. That in this phase now, we cannot say that is something that is closed, because it's not. And will come the day that the state and the government must have a clear opinion about what they want to do with the homeschooling families. That day, I think, is not come very soon, but will come in some day. But in the meantime, we have our constitution that protects us, and we have our system that provides us all kinds no, but a lot of ways that we can, and I'm talking as a lawyer, that we can manage and help the families. But of course, it's many times we get when the state are already in the families and already the protection are in the families, and we try to help them. But the law as it is not good, but we can work with that. We hope that will be changed for better, but now it's what we have. And in the practical way, I think it's a little. I think in their countries it's the same. A little from us, from Occidental values, that the children must be protected, of course, and we look for them in the best way that we can. And it's good. It's good. The parents also are very important, and the parents are very, very important for the children. But to me, as a lawyer, I prefer to work. We call here in Portugal in the superior interest of the children. It's a sentence that gives us a lot of ways to work, but it provides that we can show to whom we talk, to whom that we show the families that they make homeschooling, that this is the question. It's not about homeschooling, it's not about the parents, it's not about the state, it's not about Portugal, it's about this family and these children. And these children is getting education, and for these children, it's good for these children. So that's what we can do. I'm not in homeschooling yet because I have two kids that are, because I live in a small village, and here we are as a family. So we do homeschooling as we don't know what is, but we do with small village. But I suffer in my skin the discrimination of the school, of the public school. And that's why when I heard you about, I heard Catherine talking about being persecuted for the state. It's something that I cannot describe, but we suffered because if you repair, I noticed that I think it was Emmy that showed that homeschooling are for the children that have problems. What is this? The state is saying, okay, you have problems, you can go away. If you not have problems, you can stay. Okay, thank you very much. But the children is for everyone. The school is for everyone. So it's also a kind of way that you can work, and we work in the courts and work with the judges saying, this children is okay, special, but he's doing the fine, he's happy. So stop boarding us, and let us work. And in the public school, it's the same here. The public school, it's a little obsolete, and the teachers are very tired because the children are growing. The children are more each day exigent, and the model, it's a little low for them. And I think it's a matter of time that we can change. We learn in law school that the society can change the law. I think it's one case that the public, the countries, the people will change the law. It's just a matter of time. I think it cannot be stopped. But anyway, in the meantime, we must be in the field with them and help them as we can.
Okay, José, you asked me to let you know when your time goes.
Yes, because you talk too much. So
yes, and there are so many things to share to each other, and so many things that we can say. But right now, I say thank you for your presentation, for you, and for your work here in Portugal. And it is amazing to hear so many people, and you are one of those that totally understand what is behind the intention of doing homeschool, and the real goal that homeschool families want to get, that is that their own children have the best education they have, but mostly that their own children be happy, be healthy, be lots and lots of things. So thank you, José, and maybe we will have some questions at the end and we will talk again. Okay, thank you, José. I will now present Guillaume de Thieulloy. Guillaume is the father of 4 children. He earned a PhD in political science and wrote several books about theology and politics. He is the CEO of a group of conservative media, both online and offline, and works also in the French Senate. He's also a board member of the Global Home Education Exchange. And Guillaume, no pressure at all, but we are all very, very close to what is happening in France. So we are expecting to know the best news that we can give us about your situation, because our solidarity is with you, and we are all together in these fights. Okay, so Guillaume, the word is yours.
Thank you so much, Sílvia, and hello everybody. It's a pleasure to be here with you. First of all, some words about the current situation. Before speaking about the new law, just some few words about the current situation about freedom of education in France. The first point is that we, as in many European countries, we don't have a a school obligation, but a learning obligation. We are obliged to give instruction to our children, but it's not obligatory to attend school, especially public school. We have a system with, I could say, 4 levels. The first one is the public school. The second one is private schools with contract with the state, especially Catholic schools are in this case. A lot of Catholic schools are, the teachers are paid by the state, and in exchange, the schools are obliged to give the state program, and the teachers are state workers. That's the second level. The third level is totally free schools without any contracts with the state, and there the children can have the teaching their parents want. Of course, we are obliged to attend the exams, and so we are obliged to follow the programs, but not necessarily with the state lines. And the fourth level is the homeschooling itself. Homeschooling is in a way rare in France. We don't have any numbers. We don't have any precise numbers, but we think around 100,000, something like that, children are homeschooled. Sorry. So we don't have a lot of children homeschooled, but and especially because it's prohibited now to homeschool with several families. We are if we are choosing homeschooling, we are obliged to homeschool just in one family. And so we cannot share some abilities with other parents. So, but it's easy to build some totally free schools, very small schools in various directions. Some are conservative Catholics, some are Montessori education, some are etc. etc. Like in homeschooling, there are various motivations to build some totally free schools, and in my perspective, all of these totally free schools and homeschooling are linked in the defense of freedom of education, a common freedom of education. And also some private schools linked to the state are fighting for their own freedom of education. So, and for me, the freedom of education is one thing. We don't have to fight only for the freedom of homeschooling or only for the freedom of totally free schools. And I'm very careful to fight for all freedom of education. And not depending of the motivations of the parents, not depending of the type of education the parents are giving to their children. That's not we cannot divide this freedom of education. That's the current situation nowadays. We have a great concern about a new law, but we don't know exactly this new law. It's when I speak, this law is studied by the what we call the State Council, which is the highest administrative law court. And so we will have some information about this law within few days. But nevertheless, some points about this. This new law is supposed to be published on the 9th of December, very soon. 9th of December is the day of the law of separation between church and state, and it's very symbolic for the President Macron to publish the law this day. It's against what he called Islamic separatism, which is a very strange thing. President Macron is telling us that the political program of Islamic radicalism is to create some separate schools, some separate quarters, some separate neighborhoods, everything. So they are trying to build a separatism against the French society. Of course, that's probably not exactly the good understanding of the program of Islamic radicalism, but that's not my point today. At least what told us President Macron about this, he told us that to fight Islamic separatism, quotation, he will prevent parents to homeschool their children, which is a way to separate from French society. Of course, we can easily understand that some Islamic fundamentalists are using homeschooling to do that. Perhaps we don't know. We don't have any statistics about this, so it's perhaps true, but perhaps false also. And our answers to this is first that the analysis is not a good analysis about Islamic fundamentalism. That's the first point, but I don't deal with this today. The second point is that freedom of education is a natural right, whatever the motivations of the parents are, and so we cannot allow the state to prohibit freedom of education just to fight some excesses which are perhaps true but perhaps false also, and at least you cannot fight a freedom just because this freedom could be used, could be badly used. The second point is that's a natural right. The third point is that we can fight Islamic radicalism with many other, including in schools, with many other means. Just an example, 1 or 2 weeks before the speech of Macron, we learned that the Home Office in France just shut down an Islamic school in northern Paris because this school was a totally free school, but also not a school where children were learning anything but Quran. That's easy to use many other means to fight Islamic radicalism, even in schools. And our last answer to President Macron is that what he proposed about freedom of education, against freedom of education, is also against our own word as a country in international rights, in international law, and it would be my conclusion. We have a lot of hopes about this. The first one is about this law. The first one is the current state of the law, the State Council. The State Council is known to be very cautious about freedoms, generally speaking, not only freedom of education, but freedoms, generally speaking. And I don't think he will allow the government to do whatever he wants. That's the first point. And the second point is that both the State Council and what we call also the Constitutional Council, after the law, we can present the law, some MPs and senators can present the law to what we call the Constitutional Council, a sort of Supreme Court in a way. to ask if this law is compatible with the Constitution. And we have a lot of reasons to think that the Constitutional Council cannot support some point. Once again, we don't know what will be precisely in this law, but if the law prohibits homeschooling, we are confident that the Constitutional Council will tell to the government that it's against our international obligations, and so we have a lot of ways to fight this law. The worst, we have also a huge fear, which is that the president have a huge majority in the National Assembly, and if the law is presented, including with the prohibition of homeschooling, a large majority of MPs will vote in favor of prohibition of homeschooling. So thank you very much, everybody, for your support, your prayers, and God bless you all.
Thank you, Guillaume. Listening to you, I could not stop feeling the mistakes that sometimes society and governments make about ourselves. And of course, we are all concerned about so many extremist way of living that we can find in so many dynamics in our life. And of course, we are all against any kind of violence, any kind of terrorism. There are no doubt about that. But at the same time, it's so sad to hear a testimony that show us how can some governments mistake things and put things in a perspective that is not the perspective. The homeschool families and the results of kids home educated are here to show that there are no threats for anyone and for any reality, and things like violence are part of society. We have to confront them and resolve them, but not putting categories about things that we do like homeschooling or the school option and things like that. So thank you, Guillaume, for your sharing, and I hope we have some minutes at the end also with you to know a little bit more about so many things. So I will present now Marek Budajezak. I'm sorry, Marek, I cannot say that, but I can say Dzień dobry. I hope I'm saying it okay. I don't know how to say good afternoon, but I remember how to say good morning because I went to Poland some years ago. It was one of the biggest experience that I have in the 80s. So it's so nice to be here with someone from Poland that is a country that I truly love. Marek deals with home education in several ways. With his wife and daughter and son, he was among the first 25 years ago homeschoolers in their country. As a scholar with his PhD in educational sciences and professorate at Marek, University of Poland. You can correct me when I give you the word. Yeah. You wrote the first scholarly book on home education within continental Europe, with 3 editions by now, along with many articles and interviews for popular media. He is the president of the Home Education Association and also of Education Domestica Institute, helping very many Polish parents, even in court cases, with homeschooling their children and fighting for just legislation in the field. Thank you, Marek, to be here. So the word is you, and please correct me and say the names of that I didn't said correctly, okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Sílvia. Well, Polish language is treated as one of the most difficult in Europe, but there are some languages like Hungarian and Finnish, so it's okay. My name is Budajezak, and my university name is Adam Mickiewicz. It was a famous a romantic poet. Well, I'm not going to just introduce some additional legal cases here. I would try to place some special accents within the matters we are taking up here. But let me start with a paraphrase. All of you know, I suppose, the ugly aphorism assigned to American general of the Civil War, Philip H. Sheridan. I'm quoting, "The only good Indian is yes, a dead Indian," with my personal apologies to Native Americans. As for the condition of the present home education in the world, that aphorism might sound like that, I think. The only good parent is still a dead parent, or at least a parent passive in all educational issues concerning his or her child. So is, I'm afraid, a deep conviction of most school officials and professional teachers, and unfortunately, of mighty politicians. Is such an attitude of school workers of real importance for the legislation of home education? Well, yes, indeed. Statistically, teachers and school clerks form the biggest group of professionals and voters either in any country, and politicians of different levels of power are often recruited from among those same teachers. For example, 13% of all Polish parliament members, the biggest group by job, are just teachers. Furthermore, it's obvious that educational laws and their changes in every single state are unique and closely intertwined with local politics, economy, and culture, and with personalities of people active in the public sphere. These laws are highly unstable. We can see that. One small shift in a personal attitude of a political decision maker brings about big social changes. Physicists call it the butterfly effect, as you remember. Well, here you are a Polish example. Home education has been legal in Poland since 1991, being introduced just after the communism collapse, with some inflows and outflows as it concerns the severity of laws towards it. In general, we've got regulations pretty friendly to home educators, and because of that, people from other countries like Germany or even Sweden, Jonas, settle down here in Poland as they are not allowed to do it at their homelands. In 2015, a conservative party, Law and Justice, took power in Poland. It might seem hopeful because, as a rule, conservatives and liberals respect parental freedoms in their point, in opposition to social democrats. But in 2016, the parliament, dominated by the ruling party, approved a new educational act much worse than the previous one of liberals. Why so? Well, in 2015, at the very beginning of her directing of Ministry of National Education in Poland, a huge and the first criticism ever fell on she minister, a criticism from the part of Polish home educators and media. She then signed an act cutting a big percentage of the public money transferred to the schools that control and organize yearly exams for homeschoolers. First scared, soon she minister recovered and started her attacks and doing her restrictive politics against home education, and not without fault from us, from the insiders. Next, she proposed new obstructive educational laws. To a pity, almost all parliamentarians from her party voted for introducing the laws. That was a trivial, you must admit, but still decisive reason for serious changes. Fortunately, the lady went to the European Parliament a year ago, and her colleagues, along with our president and prime minister, have recently, it was during our presidential election campaign this year and coronavirus period, they have promised to change the legal rules and even introduced one for the good of homeschooling families and generally parental rights. And it did not happen without our home education promoters' involvement, of course. So there is a light in the tunnel, I think. It is our lawyers, after the formula and the example to follow of HSLDA in using weak and strong points of country's legal rules, scholars in telling the objective truths, and other social activists, constant permanent job or even mission to contact and persuade to home education, ombudsman, reasonable parliamentary parties members, ministers and president, but with taking into consideration their susceptibility, taking that personal hypersensitivity into account in our statements for the media is then important too. That's the way for us, I think. And I'm afraid there is no other, because as Polish folk wisdom says, look at that, łaska pańska na pstrym koniu jeździ, the master's goodwill rides on a motley horse, or in the English version, being in your master's good graces, that doesn't last forever. Thank you very much for your attention to my words.
Oh, thank you, Marek. You were so inspiring with your words, and I'm feeling like that. Well, that it's true. We have the light. We have the light in the tunnel, and being ourselves and be truthful with ourselves. It's a very big weapon. Not a weapon, but it's a very important issue to present ourselves with no much fear and with no much arrogance, something in between. And I love the way you finished your presentation. And please write in the chat that last sentence, because I think we can use it together in our own countries. Thank you, Marek. I hope also that we will have some questions for you. So, and just before I pass for another speaker, I think I can learn to say Budajezak. It's closer, isn't it? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Marek. So let me present you now. I will present you now Tim Vince. Tim Vince is also a Global Home Education Exchange member, has a lifelong experience in education, not only his own formal education at 5 schools and 2 UK universities, graduating with a BA Homes and, sorry Tim, MS, I don't know this in English, I'm sorry, but also as a governor of a pioneering SEN school for 28 years. He has wide commercial and charity experience in Europe and at the Middle East, edited a newspaper for religious leaders, and arranged for thousands of personal pilgrimages. Over the last 15 years, Tim has presented Christian TV programs in the United Kingdom and engaged in public interreligious debates. He leads the European Academy of Christian Homeschool, serving around 2,000 Christian homeschoolers, and is on the steering committee of the Values Foundation to support faith and families in education. He is married with 2 children who are currently at university. Thank you, Tim, for being here. So the word is yours. Welcome to this.
Thank you very much, Sílvia, and thank you everyone for all that you're saying. Marek mentioned the butterfly effect. It's quite clear that things happen in one country and you don't know the consequences in that country, and also you don't know the consequences to other legislatures around the world. And it's a moving picture. One could call it mission creep. Or one could call it the blind leading the blind, that Or you could say maybe there is an agenda to have more control, and we have to be alert. My long sort of introduction there, Sílvia, really just says I'm a layman. In English, that means, look, I'm not an expert. I'm not part of the power structure. I'm an observer. And over many years of what I would call Christian education in the private sector, I have seen the butterfly effect, as we could call it. But while we're talking about legalities, I do think that the most significant legislation that was passed in the United Kingdom, which I think is connected to many other countries, was called the Equality Act in 2010. And, for good reasons, they wanted to protect against discrimination. But there are people within our government who have other agendas. And what the Equality Act, which had 9 so-called protected characteristics to protect against discrimination, what it did was it created a hierarchy of equality, some more equal than others. And even though within the Equality Act, there's no mandate for teaching one equal protected characteristic over another, in reality, that is what happens. And it is happening on the ground in state schools across Britain to an extent that before the lockdown, there was serious unrest, what they called the school gate protests. Now, we haven't got school gate protests in homeschooling, for obvious reasons. Now, of course, the media, and I think it may be similar to what's happening in France, the media can present it, it's just Islamic extremists who are protesting against secular education. But that's not the case. Christian and Jewish parents are very concerned about certain protected characteristics being forced on their children at a very young age. And at the beginning of 2019, some new legislation was tabled, a statutory instrument. I was interested in what was said earlier about that. I think it was in Ireland with Kathleen, which brought together what they called relationships and sex education, but to be taught to the very youngest children. And it's almost semantics, because the relationships education being taught to very young children is actually sex education. But the legislation says, sex education is for children who are older. So you have to be very careful about definitions and what is actually happening. And the reality is, what is happening with certain government-funded curriculum on the ground in school classrooms is very offensive. I speak as a Christian, and it's quite clear that we shouldn't even mention, the Apostle Paul says, what the disobedient do in secret. So we have one arm tied behind our backs. I'm not going to talk about some of the details which are offensive and obscene. But those who are promoting it have no compunction. They have no shame in teaching it openly to very young children. So there are a number of pushbacks. The school gates protests are one. There's another, a person called Charlie Colchester, who's started and heads up the Let Kids Be Kids coalition. And he's very much standing for parental rights. Now, it's very suspicious that there are so many world organizations, and as we're a global conference, it's worth stating it. You have the International Planned Parenthood Federation, you have UNESCO, you have the World Health Organization. They are all pushing very hard for sexual education for young children, because it's their right, and you know, it should all be regularized and uniform. But what this does is it neglects the protected characteristic of religious faith. And I completely agree with Guillaume about there needing to be freedom of education, but there must be the freedom for parents to withdraw their children from classes that are not appropriate culturally. Now, in UNESCO, they say, education must be age appropriate and culturally appropriate. But when it comes to the coalface in the classroom, the cultural appropriateness is ignored. And actually, so is the age appropriate. And this new legislation last year, in 2019, January, made a very important change in the rights of parents, because it said that it is the head teacher who decides what is age appropriate and when it should be taught, not if it should be taught. So that shift rings alarm bells, great alarm bells. And I have about 2,000 families that who homeschool that we provide, 2,000 students who we provide homeschool curriculum for. And we have seen a great increase of parents who are alarmed that what they have trusted with what we call in loco parentis, they've given their children to teachers to act as their parents. I would say, you know, the alarm bell should ring immediately that term comes up now. But the parents have effectively given a contract, signed a contract to the state to become parents for their children. And again, if you don't mind me quoting the scriptures, it says we should not be unevenly yoked. And that's not only in a relationship or in a business relationship. I would say it could also apply to a relationship with the states. And so it's a moving picture. On the home education front, in 2009, there was a push with a report by Graham Badman to have a compulsory registration. We have a very liberal environment for home education currently, but there are many pushbacks by legislators to have more registration and then regulation. There was also a private member's bill by Clive Soley, who was a member of the House of Lords in 2017, same story. And now currently, even during this pandemic, we have the Education Select Committee doing what they call a call for evidence, asking people to basically give their own testimonials on the rights and wrongs of what they call homeschooling. Now, we had in our workshop yesterday on homeschooling a discussion on definitions. Now, those who homeschool for Christian reasons or for parental rights and freedom reasons and have done before the pandemic would be those who term themselves as those who elect to do home education. It's elective home education. The term homeschooling can give an impression of a whole spectrum of standards, and some which lead to children not being well cared for. And of course, that is what the media will pick up on. In Wales a few years ago, a child whose parents had a New Age philosophy, the child died of scurvy, you know, a vitamin C deficiency. So, and that becomes a great news story, how terrible home education is. I just want to say 10 years ago, I spoke to a parliamentary group in the UK Parliament on, it was called the Lords and Commons Family and Child Protection Group. And as I went in, I met my local member of Parliament, Laura Sands. She was only a member for one term. Her father was Duncan Sands, who was in Winston Churchill's cabinet. And Laura said, "Hello, Tim, what are you doing here?" And I said, "Well, I'm here to speak to the Family and Child Protection Group. This was 10 years ago, the same year that the Equality Act 2010 was passed. And she said, family and child protection, isn't that a contradiction? She said. And that for me illustrates how legislators see things differently. And I would argue that because the framework, the traditional values framework that has served Europe and served our Western civilization very well, because that has broken down, we do have some very dysfunctional families, dysfunctional parenting. I can post an article by the BBC just published today talking about their fears over home education. And it was a report by Amanda Spielman, who is the head of the Ofsted Inspectorate. That's the Office for Standards in Education in the UK. And obviously she wants more kids back in school. She wants more regulation of homeschools. So there's an angle to her article, but it does show that there is a lot of dysfunctional parenting out there. And so we have a real job on our hands because it's a moving target. I won't go, I think you'll tell me to stop in a minute, Sílvia. But 100 years ago, the famous Arthur Balfour, who was the foreign secretary who brought in the Balfour Declaration and started the foundation of the modern state of Israel. In 1902, not many people have heard of the Balfour Education Act, all for very good reasons. It's the butterfly effect again. And the idea was to improve standards. So on the pretext of improving standards, the state took control of schooling away from non-conformists and other Christian groups, because all education was Christian 150 years ago, is church provision or homeschooling. Now, the consequences of that act was that the Conservative government fell at the 1906 general election, and because there was an uproar in the country taking away parental rights, taking away the freedom to educate according to one's religious convictions. Now, the Liberal Party and government came in then, and the law of unintended consequences means that that same state control, which was very altruistic and good-natured and good-willed and good-intentioned, led to what we have now, which is an aggressive secular state, which I would like to say that they have good intentions, but the consequences of the last 10 years and the way legislation, and Roger Kiska, who is a great expert, will be speaking following me, so I won't go into too many details. He's a very respected human rights lawyer. But as I've looked as a layman from the outside at how politicians hide their agenda within legislation, how they fail to declare their intentions. The 2010 election with David Cameron and Nick Clegg, who now heads up, the monitoring of Facebook, so that should reassure us all, of posts in Facebook. No, they had a hidden agenda on same-sex marriage, and they didn't declare it at the election. And that broke down an enormous amount of trust in politics and legislation. So my concern is, one, what is in legislation, and secondly, what is not there overtly. And there is an argument now that is being put forward that the forcing of certain sexual education is ultra-virus. The forcing of teaching of this protected characteristic over others is ultra-virus, even when it comes to the Equality Act 2010. And it will eventually, hopefully, come to court with a great lawyer like Roger Kiska to challenge what is actually being taught children in the schools and where parental rights stand. Because if the battle is lost in the schools, it won't be too long before they're crossing the threshold of the home, trying to impose the same regularization. So
Okay.
I'm sorry there wasn't too much legal detail there, but that's my observation.
No, it was very, very, very nice. And sorry for interrupting you, but we agreed that I will do it. I will do it. So, well, just a brief comment that. I was with you yesterday in the session where we not discussed, but we made some approach about definitions, and it seems like the definition sometimes, in my opinion, is not the real issue. But when we pass for legal aspects, definition is all. So that is what I feel, that if we don't know exactly what we are saying with the wrongs, that the words that represent what we mean to say about our own reality, everything can be compromised with politicians, with some legal aspects. So I truly hope that we have some time for some debate, because you bring along so many important and somehow sorry, I forgot the word, not easy things to discuss. So, but let's hear, before we pass for the discussion, let's hear Roger Kiska. Okay, yes. That I want to present you, the last but not the least. Okay, Roger. Roger is a solicitor for England and Wales and a member of the Michigan State Bar. He's a legal counsel for the Christian Legal Center in London. Kiska has acted in numerous cases before the European Court of Human Rights and the Court of Justice of the European Union. He has also served as an elected member of the advisor panel of the European Union's Fundamental Rights Agency. In 2012, Kiska received the prestigious Scandinavian Human Dignity Award for his legal contributions towards human rights. He is a frequent contributor to television and radio, including the BBC, Sky News, Channel 5, and ITV. So welcome, Kiska. The word is yours. We are thrilled to hear from you.
Well, thank you very much for having me, and thanks also to Tim for the nice introduction. And he'll be pleased to know that we do have an ongoing challenge of some of the stuff that's happening in our schools in the UK and how ideological it's become. I think one of the tensions that we have in the UK comes with our culture. And just to explain that a little bit, when Queen Elizabeth took the throne in 1952, and this has nothing to do with the Queen Elizabeth taking the throne other than that it exhibits how much culture has changed over the last few decades. There were only 4.8% of children who were born outside of wedlock. That number is now 46.8%. Divorce has increased 600% in that time. With regard to the number of children, and this is a very startling statistic, the number of children referred to gender identity clinics in the UK from 2009, before this was a matter dealt with by the Equality Act and before this was in the schools, there was only 97 kids referred to gender identity clinics. In 2019, last year alone, there was 2,519 kids. That is an increase of 2,500%. So there's something happening in our schools which should cause us concern. And I would suggest that with the breakdown of the marriage culture, the state has stepped in and become more aggressive in taking on the parental role. And we've certainly seen that in this wider spectrum of home education. So with my time, I'd like to discuss briefly three subjects. First, from a wider international perspective, is the international law that protects parental rights in education. Then I'll move to the actual situation in the international courts. And finally, I'll close with what's happening in the UK. Tim alluded to some of that, so I'll do that very briefly. First, there is a great deal of convention law that parents should be aware of, protecting their rights to define the education that their own kids have. And we have to remember that these are your kids, they're not the state's children. And that gives you all sorts of rights. So for example, one of my favorite provisions can be found in the Convention Against Discrimination in Education. That's a UN document, and it can be found at Articles 5.1b. And that states, and I quote here, that it is essential that states respect the liberty of parents and, where applicable, legal guardians, firstly, to choose for their children institutions other than those maintained by the public authorities, but conforming to such minimal educational standards as may be laid down or approved by the competent authorities. So right there, you have a convention that most of the countries in Europe have signed, saying that states have guaranteed that they will seek out educational institutions that are not schools, so alternative education. Now they have a right to guarantee quality control, that the content of that education meets some minimal standard, but they cannot, according to that convention, forbid home education. Yet we see across Europe in places like Sweden and Germany prohibitive laws with regard to that particular parental right. One of the panelists alluded to Article 26.3 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, where it says that parents have a prior right to choose the kind of education that shall be given to their children. Now, a prior right obviously suggests the right to home education. Now, unfortunately, the Declaration of Human Rights is that it is a declaration, and so it's not binding on any state. But that being said, it did give rise to two binding conventions, those being the International Covenant on Economic, Cultural, and Social Rights, where at Article 13, it suggests that education must conform to parental rights, and that the state has an obligation to respect the way a parent wants to raise their children in accordance with their own educational beliefs. The ICCPR, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, says basically the same thing. Article 18.4 says it. And so you have the two conventions that are defining what the Human Rights Declaration says, saying that you have to respect the right of parents to guide the education of their children. The Convention on the Rights of the Child at Article 14 has the exact same provision. And it says, importantly, at Article 18, that parents, being the ones who love their children the most, have the primary role deciding on the education of their children. And of course, here in Europe, we have the Convention on Human Rights and the European Court of Human Rights, which at Protocol 1, Article 2 says that the state must respect the right of parents to raise their children in accordance with their own religious and philosophical beliefs. One of those beliefs certainly would be pedagogical beliefs. Another would be faith beliefs, both which underpin home education. Now, unfortunately, the most recent decision that's come out of Strasbourg, being the Wunderlich v. Germany decision, again, like the Conrad decision several years earlier, suggested that home education was not a right under the convention. And what disappointed me about that particular judgment is, as we've seen in other homeschooling cases in Germany and in Sweden, is the disproportionate punishment of parents for home educating. So we've seen heavy fines, we've seen police breaking through doors in riot gear, we've seen parents imprisoned with regard to opting out from sex education. To say that somehow is a proportionate response to a loving parent's desire to educate their children and guide their children's education, to me, is a fundamental misunderstanding of both parental rights and home education. So I think moving forward, we'll have to be creative in bringing these cases, because I think Wunderlich was one of our best opportunities to show how bad the situation is for homeschoolers and how much we need a right under the convention for homeschooling parents. Now, thankfully, this isn't too distant from what happened in the United States and how home education became a right in US law. So the hope is there, and homeschooling parents just need to continue to be brave and to fight. So briefly about the UK situation, Tim mentioned relationships education is now mandatory. There's a statutory obligation in all schools across England, including faith schools and independent schools, to teach it. LGBT elements are required in secondary school and heavily suggested in primary school. And Ofsted, who is the inspectorate in the UK, is now required to monitor whether that's being implemented or not. So why that concerns people like me and Tim is that over the last few years, the government, the Department for Education, has been insistent that we need to set up a system of registration within the local authorities to monitor home educating kids. Now, while that on its own isn't worrisome, the fact that government, each time it takes one step towards monitoring, encroaches more and more on parental rights. So it never stops at step one. It keeps on going until the next step, which could be that parents can be visited by local authorities, which is already a statutory right, to ensure education is happening, but that they can demand that these equality considerations are taken into account. And one step after that, having Ofsted doing inspections, and before you know it, home educating parents will be required to teach the same sex education and relationships education and LGBT material in schools as a matter of law. So Tim mentioned there was the call for evidence by the Select Committee just this year in 2019. There was a public consultation by the DFE, and in 2018 one as well. So they have not been shy about their intentions, each year holding a different consultation, trying to push this through. Thankfully, home educating parents have been overwhelming in their responses. So keep up the good work. We'll keep fighting for you. Stay strong. Your kids are worth it. God bless you.
Oh, thank you, Roger. It's an honor for us to hear about your opinion and your experience. And you closed your moment of speak with this strong idea that I would love to underline, that we have the strength and the tools to continue to do this work of fighting for freedom and whatever. Well, I put in that in my own words, but I think what I would like to comment for us all before we could answer one or two questions in the last minutes that we have so many few minutes, is that even though all of us, all of the speakers spoke about difficulties and things that went not so good, some some barriers that we have to cross over. The main thing that I would love to don't forget is that the only reason why we speak about that it's because we believe that we can do better and we deserve better. I usually say in my country that as long as only one family don't benefit from the freedom for educate their own children that they deserve, it's we have to continue to work. I mentioned that because I read some comments in the chat saying that there are also things that are going well. And it's true, there are lots and lots of families that are not passing by difficulties in their own recognition of homeschooling. And here in Europe, there are so many different experiences about that I would just make clear that there are lots of good experiences, lots of possibilities of doing a real and free homeschool in many different countries in Europe. However, in this session, we are trying to get along with the problematic of how can we resolve more together when the difficulties become, because we are observing some legal aspects that are changing. In Portugal, the laws changed last year. France is as it is. So I just want to say that. So let me look at one or two questions that we have here, and I will invite some speakers to answer for some questions in the last minutes that we have. We have here a question for José Ramalho. And the question is, can parents ask the judge to assess the constitutionality of the school law, like in the USA? Okay, the question is put by Peter Van sorry, I will not say the word. So José, can you answer in just a brief moment, please, for me to ask more questions?
Yes, of course they can. The Constitution is the basis of our legislation, and each citizen can reivindicate the Constitution. Of course, legally in the process, talking about the process itself, there are ways to do that. But basically they can ask that, and they can use that as a flag before the court, before the judge. Of course, the judge will have to make a decision about that, and then the parents or the family can appeal about that. It's a question that could be discussed in the process, yes.
And José, maybe we can also share that we are using here a strategy of defending homeschool and return to the freedom that we had before last year, using precisely the courts to recognize our rights. So I think it's good for people to know these different strategies that different countries can use, and we are using courts to see. So I hope that in the beginning of 2021, we will make some news, some international news about the results of our process in court, okay? So let me pass for another question, a question for Guillaume. Okay, Guillaume, I'm surprised by the, well, I've just blocked my English for numbers. Sorry, well, I'm sorry for the one that made the question. I'm completely blocked right now. Well, but the question is about, the person is interested in knowing where you got the numbers that you said during your presentation, okay?
If it's about the numbers of kids homeschooled, that's I'm certainly not sure that they are true, or even that they are close to the reality, but they are the numbers which circulate, if I could say, in the parliament. Usually, and I'm clearly not sure that they are true. Just to give you an example, I know very well one of the staffers which voluntarily changed the order of numbers of greatness about a thing which has nothing to do with homeschooling, but he told me that the MP he was working for asked him to just add a 0 after his number, because the MP found that the number he gave was too small and not enough significant, and so of course he obeyed the MP. And nowadays the number with an artificial 0 more, so 10 times more, is in a way the true number used by any newspapers in France. So I'm clearly not telling that the numbers are true, but I'm just telling that this something like several tens of thousands of people, around a little less than 100,000 children, is the number used in the parliament. Whatever, yeah. What I'm not sure it's true.
We have lots of questions for you, but I will select one more, okay? And later, for those who made the questions, we will give you the questions by written, and it will stay in the record, okay? But for now, there are here another question. Why the new law in France says that homeschooling is promoting radicalism when we had news from violence and killing of a professor at school not at homeschool?
Yes, that's
a great question.
That's a good remark. But in a way, this slaughter is for us. Of course, it's an awful story, but for our dealing with this law, it's worse because everybody in France took this attack as an attack against a public school. Of course, that's not exactly true. But so in a way, it could harden the law against the so-called separatism. So the idea of the president is this: if a Muslim kid attends to public school, he will learn what they call Republican values, and nobody knows what is Republican values. Of course, the president himself told about the right of blasphemy, which should be in his mind, which should be the bottom line of the Republic against Islamic radicalism, which is absolutely crazy. Of course, no one believer can support a right to blasphemy, and it can. That's an awful way to fight radical Islamism, to claim a right to blasphemy. But so the idea of Macron is this: a Muslim kid attending to a public school will learn Republican values and will attend this abstract community, which should be this Republican community without any roots in any civilization. But it could be a good Muslim and a good French. Of course, it cannot work like this. The only way to integrate Muslim immigrations is to help them to love French history, French culture, French civilization, and European civilization as well. And so the worst way to do it is to do it like Macron is doing, which is telling that France is guilty of any crimes against humanity in Northern Africa and for colonization or so on. And on one hand, telling that France is guilty of everything, if I could say, and on the other hand, to say that the true France is the France which claims the right to blasphemy. So, of course, no Muslim can join this sort of abstract France, and also that's not only a question of Muslim. That's a question of all civilized people cannot support this sort of country. So I'm pretty sure that that's a very bad way, a very bad diagnosis, and a very bad solution to the bad diagnosis.
Okay, thank you, Guillaume. We have no more time for no more questions, but I want to thank you all that attend this session, the interest that you have to be here with us, and I want to thank you all the speakers. It was wonderful to know much more about what is happening in our different countries here in Europe. And I want also to say hi to those who maybe had attended this session from other parts of the world, because I know they were. Thank you for being interested in what is happening here in Europe. And let me remind you the session, another session about Europe tomorrow. I don't know the hour for sure, but you can consult the program to know and to see when it is. And we will have a workshop session where to share different ways of resolve different things next Thursday, as Amy said. So if you want to learn more about GAGX, please consult our website. We are here to establish more connections, to be more together, even with our differences, with our lacks of knowledge about so many things. The main thing is that we are together and working for a common cause. So for me, it was wonderful to be here with you. I say bye to Guillaume, José, Marek, Tim, Roger, Jonas, and Amy. It was wonderful, and I hope we will see us again. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.